Hello and welcome back, or welcome if you are new. Today we're just going to talk about all the books we read in October. So for the month of October, I actually did a lot of reading. I realized today as I was getting the books ready and kind of seeing what I read over, I read 13 books. I think that was the final tally count. So I did read a lot this month, more than I think I have in several months combined in the past, but it was a good month for reading. So let me tell you what we started reading. Now I did join 3 different readathons here on YouTube, and I will link the video both up in the cards and then down in the description box of the readathons video where I said what I was going to be reading or trying to read, and then the names and rules for that readathon, or those 3 different ones that I did. So that did account for me just kind of tallying more of my books up and just honing in and really getting some good reading done. Also, the change of weather, I feel like, has really helped because it's just so nice and cozy to stay in and read under a nice blanket. So that also helped. We'll see. We'll see if I can keep up. I don't think I can keep up the pace of all these books, 13 books a month, for the remainder of the year, but I do want to keep on reading. I find that it is just such a great escape for me right now. So let me tell you what I read. Most of the books I read, I checked out from the library, so I have returned some of them already. In fact, I've returned a majority of them because we were frequenting the library a lot more often, because I wanted to, as soon as I was done with the book, I wanted to go ahead and get it back to the library just in case somebody else was looking for something else to read. It didn't make sense for me to hang on to it just for the sake of filming a video to physically show you. So we'll find a picture and I will put them up so you can see it. Maybe for next month, if we do this again, I will film as I go, as I finish reading the books before I return them. But the first book that I finished reading this month was Poplar, How a Geek in Pearls Discovered the Secret to Confidence. Sorry, I'm peeking over at my laptop to see if I get the title just right. And that was by Maya van Wagenen. Like I said, I will put the picture up of the book for you. This was a really sweet story. This was a story about a young girl, Maya. It's actually her true story about how she found this vintage book on how to be popular, written way before her time, and she kind of follows the instructions in it and what all ensues from her doing that. And in her doing that, she finds her own voice and just an inner confidence in herself. It was really sweet. One of the things that I found kind of, I don't know, fascinating, or just I found both sad and fascinating, is the way that we can tend to view ourselves. So in the book, the copy that I have, she does include pictures, and she includes pictures of herself where she kind of describes herself as chubby and just kind of plain looking, nothing fancy. And I remember looking at this young girl and being like, she's so cute, she's so pretty. I didn't think that she looked chubby at all. I know size is kind of relevant, right? But I think also it calls to attention the way that we view ourselves, and how sometimes, a lot of times, we can be our harshest critic, especially at young, tender ages. I remember thinking that I was fat, oh my gosh, as early as the 4th, 5th grade. It kind of just reminded me of how we can have these negative thoughts about ourselves, and then the outside world may not even be thinking or seeing us like that. And so for just a reminder for us to be aware of what we're saying in front of younger kids, but also a reminder to encourage people, maybe. I don't know. I thought it was a great, sweet book, but that was just one thing that I did notice, that I didn't see that in her when I saw those pictures. I just saw a sweet, really pretty young girl, and the story, the transformation that she goes on, and some of the things she goes through as the book progresses was really good. So I would recommend this book. I give it a 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was a good, sweet book. The next one that I read was Unbirthday. It is part of the Twisted Tales by Liz Braswell. And this one I honestly was not expecting to enjoy very much. I like Alice in Wonderland, but I am not a huge fanatic. I think the story is great. I actually liked the later versions of the movies, the live action movies of, I think like in 2010, 2016, the Alice in Wonderland, and then I think the next one is called like Through the Looking Glass. Those movies, I really enjoyed those movies. better than the cartoon version. So I wasn't really expecting to like this book as much as I did. So I was pleasantly surprised. I thought that in this book they did a good job giving Alice a voice and opinion of her own. I think a lot of times maybe that can get lost in the story of Alice in Wonderland, where it is supposed to be focused on Alice and her finding her voice, but sometimes it just feels like all of these things in these books, there's just stuff that's happening to her and she's just trying to wade through and get to the other side. She's not really processing until it just hits her like a brick at the end of the story. This one I really felt like she was making the connections along the way. She was kind of working her way through the steps and the progression, instead of everything just kind of happening to her and at the very end looking back and being like, oh, now I get it. I hope that this makes sense. But that ended up being a book that I did enjoy. I don't usually rate my books, so I either like them or I don't, and then there's some kind of midway point. But this one I did like, so I would put it in that category of books that I did enjoy reading. I don't know that I would read it again, but I rarely will reread books. So there's that. The next book that I finished was Sloppy First. It is a Jessica Darling book. It is the first in a series. That one is by Megan McCafferty. This book was it was okay for me. It was good. It wasn't bad. It was a nice, easy, lighthearted read. But honestly, I read it towards the beginning of the month, and I don't remember too much about it. I had to go back in and read the kind of synopsis for the book to remember what it was about, and so that's why I feel like it probably wasn't a book that I'm going to continue on with. I know that there's another, I think like 2 or 3 books that go with this series, but I've already moved on for it, and you'll see later in this video there's a series that got me sucked into, and I'm just bound and determined to finish that one. So let's keep going. The next book that I finished for the month of October was You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. This book I had seen a while back ago, a lot of people talking about it, and by a lot of people on my YouTube algorithm, that's the videos that kept coming up there where they were suggesting this book. So I did read the book. I did like it. It follows the main character, and as she's kind of navigating through high school, she goes to a high school, and I don't know if I can't remember if she's at that high school on scholarship, but she is one of the few students that doesn't have as much money as the other students in her high school, and so she is trying to get her way to college, and she decides to run for prom queen because there's a scholarship involved with it. And it kind of follows her adventure in that. So I checked this book out from the library, and all in all, I thought it was a sweet read too. The next book that I read was for part of the readathons that I was doing, and it is part of a series. I read The School for Good and Evil. Now, if you saw my video, you see at first I checked out the wrong book and I had to go back and get the correct one. But I needed the first book in the series. I did go back and get that and read it. And then it set me kind of on this whirlwind adventure of like finishing the series. Let me explain. I find it very hard to DNF a book. Once I like commit, even if I don't like it, I really want to finish it. Not to say that I don't put books in my didn't finish pile, but it is difficult for me. So and especially because I was reading this for a readathon, I really wanted to make sure that I finished reading the book. But there were parts of this book where I was just kind of reading and skimming over because I wanted to read the book, and I was looking to get to the better parts of the book, if that makes sense. I think all in all, it is a good story. It's just parts of it sometimes dragged on, or parts of it I felt like weren't necessary maybe, or didn't appeal to me. So I know there are some people out there that absolutely love the series, and I can see why. As far as the first book went, there were parts that were a little harder for me to read through and complete, but I was determined to complete the book. So I finished the book, and it felt very abrupt to me. The way that it ended, I was like, what? That's it? It didn't. I'm a reader that likes for my books to finish and be complete and feel like it is complete. And I know that that's not life all the time, and that's okay if those are your kind of books that you're like, well, that's not life and you shouldn't read books like that. That's okay for you. For me, this is what I like to read. I like for them to be finished and feel like it's all tied up and makes sense to me. And this book didn't feel like that, and I get why. Because it is a series, and he has 2 more other books that were prepared to be read together. The first 3 books are kind of a series in a series, if that makes sense. So right now there are 6 books all together. But you can read the first 3 and kind of complete the series in itself. In fact, the 3rd book is called The Last Ever After. But the next 4, 5, and 6 books, the next 3 books, are called the Camelot Years, and they follow kind of the same characters but another part of the story. So I read the first book and I felt like it wasn't complete, so then I had to finish the 2nd book. And by the time I got into the 2nd book, I was like, well, now I'm in it for the long haul and I have to read the 3rd book. So I read the 3rd book fully intending to be done with it, because I thought, okay, I can stop here and feel like I completed the chapter. I have read The Last Ever After, but I didn't stop. So I read book 1, book 2, and book 3. And then there's a character in the book who is the son of King Arthur and Queen Guinevere. And I was trying to piece together what I had heard about this story, and if I was piecing it together right, or if I was just making stuff up in my head. So I went to my son's bookshelf, because we had purchased him this Usborne graphic novel of King Arthur, and I remember that he had that on his shelf, so I picked it up and I asked him if I could borrow it. So I also ended up reading this book for the month of October, also because I was in the middle of the series, The School for Good and Evil. I read book 1, book 2, book 3, book 4, and I've just completed book 5. Thank goodness my library has these books, because I wouldn't have purchased them for myself, but like I said, I needed to know the rest of the story. And some of these books finish off in a way that he does a great job with you wanting to read the rest of the story, the rest of the series, because some of them leave off on such cliffhangers that you're like, no, it can't end this way. I need closure. So I will finish, or I plan to finish, book 6 and finish the series, but that will probably happen next month, not this month. In fact, I know for sure it's not happening for the month of October. The other book that I've read is Anne of Green Gables. This book, oh, my heart. This book was so good. I have mentioned before in some of my other videos that I wanted to start reading more classics. It's just something that I threw out to myself and want to do. So I thought I would start with Anne of Green Gables, and I'm so glad that I did, because it is such a sweet, sweet book. I ended up checking that book out from the library as well, because I didn't know if I would like it or not ever having read it before, and I was hesitant to buy it just in case I didn't like it. And now I'm like, I need this book in every cover copy they have, because I just really enjoyed it. I thought that it was such an enjoyable book, clearly, but it was just such a sweet, lighthearted story. There are some parts in there that are not so lighthearted, but overall, it just made me, gave me the warm and fuzzies that I wanted for this season. It was a great escape, and it was just such a great reminder that there is always good to be seen. I read the actual novel, and then I checked out online the graphic novel of the book as well, and I kind of read that side by side with it. So I read the novel, and then I read the graphic novel for Anne of Green Gables, and both were very, very sweet. And then the last book for the month of October, I haven't returned quite yet, is From Twinkle with Love. So funny story with this one is that I did check it out at the beginning of the month, and then, like I said, we were going back and forth to the library returning books. I actually returned it without reading it. I didn't realize it until probably like a few days later, and I was just going to toss it up and be like, well, I guess I'm not reading that this month. But one of my son's books that he had put on hold was ready to be picked up, and he was really anxious to read it. So we stopped in to grab the book, and it was just like one of those quick stops where we weren't going to stay and peruse very often, but we ran in to grab it, and when we ran in to grab it, this was already back on the shelves, so I picked it up again to read. And I'm glad that I did, because this was also a sweet story. I'm pretty sure I said that about like 90% of the books that I read this month, but those are the kind of stories that I like to read. Nice, sweet stories. This one follows a young girl, Twinkle, and she has these aspirations to direct movies and to tell stories. And she writes, this book is written in like email format where she's writing letters to, it seems like she's writing letters to different directors that she admires, but really it's her journal. She just feels silly in the beginning of the book. She says, I feel silly writing to myself. So she imaginary writes to these directors and talks about her life, and then it goes back and forth with some actual things that are not in her letters about what's happening in the life in her character's life. And she gets the opportunity to direct a movie alongside one of her other classmates, and at the same time she starts receiving emails from a secret admirer. So in the book you have to you're reading along and you're wondering who the secret admirer is, and meanwhile the other student, the fellow student that she is kind of doing this film with, there could be emotions there as well. So I have read the other book by this author, When Dimple Met Rishi, and that was also a great read for me too. It was a nice sweet read. Like I said, I don't know how many times I can say sweet in this video. But I enjoyed that book as well. So that is the wrap up for October, everything that I read. I did a lot of reading for me. That's more than I usually do. I usually can't cram in that many books, but I know that I have been staying off social media pretty frequently and picking up a book instead, and it's been so great. So if you need a break, I would encourage you to pick up a few books and read. If you want to, I would love to hear down below in the comments what you've been reading, if you've read any of these books that I have, and if you liked any of them, or if you have any other sweet reads that you would recommend for me to read, I would love to know that as well. Thanks so much for hanging out with me and going over the books I read. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and let me know. If you aren't already, maybe consider subscribing and joining our small YouTube family. Thanks.